Here's Stephen Goldman. What's up, Steve?
Hey, how are you?
Hey, so now Danny tells me you're a real historian.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I've written quite a bit about the history of baseball over the years. Sure.
Now, what do you think? So try to just like generalize. Can you wrap your head around how incredibly different the record books are going to be between now and 10 years ago? Like, can you even conceptualize, like, forget about asterisks or this, that, like, what do you count? Like, it's so off the charts. How do you even continue to compare them on an equal ground? I mean, is there any way to do that?
You know what? They've changed dramatically, but the thing is that they've always been kind of bogus. And, one of the things that we have to keep in mind when we look at players across times or across eras and say, well, okay, the real record's not Barry Bonds' record, it's Roger Maris's record. The real record's not Roger Maris's, it's Babe Ruth's record. But when you look at that and you say, well, Babe Ruth played in a lily-white league. He didn't play against the best competition of his time. He played against the best white players that they could find.
Right.
Never mind any African Americans or Japanese for that matter. He didn't play night games. He didn't play against relief pitchers. In the ninth inning, he was still hitting against some pitcher who'd been out there sweating during the day for 180 pitches. And in any given year, in Babe Ruth's time, say, there were a couple of teams that just really weren't trying very hard. They had some team that might be worse than the Marlins or the Astros are this year every single year. So it's not just the last 20 years or the so-called steroid era that we have to take with a grain of salt. You have to kind of apply some skepticism to all of it to really get a sense of it.
So what is a bigger? So you might say that even Babe Ruth, his records aren't as legitimate because the difference in the numbers is more skewed because of what he didn't have to deal with. I mean, the steroids here and there, everyone's doing steroids. Okay, it's a bunch of guys doing the same thing, where the way you just put it, it makes you think, Babe Ruth, his records don't mean nearly as much.
They mean a lot in the context of his time. If you still want to say, hey, Babe Ruth stood head and shoulders above most of the guys that he played with, or him and a handful of other guys, Lou Gehrig and so on, you want to say that they were well ahead of the group that they were in, their class, then that's still legitimate. And the same thing goes throughout the years. Mickey Mantle, again, played in a league that was more competitive than Ruth's, not as competitive as ours. He was way above everybody else, and that's still true. But if you want to say that the level of competition in Ruth's time and compare that to what a player today is facing, I really don't think there's much of a contest.
Yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying. So is the answer just to look at every era, like not to put an asterisk and not to keep these guys out of the Hall of Fame? Just look at every era as what they are. And this is the era of, Babe Ruth was in the racist era. You could call it that. The racist era where no blacks played. And he didn't have to deal with that. And the travel, blah, blah, blah. And also you may have teams literally throwing games, forget not trying, throwing games for gamblers and laying, didn't hit against sliders or a great cutter. You could say all that and just make every stat stand on its own and forget it. We're the steroid era. He was the racist, no slider era, I mean, what are you going to do? That's the way you put it, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And you hit on it with the slider, too. One of the reasons that players like Joe DiMaggio came back from World War II and weren't quite as good as they were beforehand, it wasn't just that they were older or that they'd laid off for a few years, but in the interim, pitches like the slider had come in and they'd never had to deal with that before. So it's always changing. And, one of the interesting things, just to throw you a curveball, if you don't mind my using that expression, is that when you look at at the so-called steroids era and you look at what's happening now and you start filtering out things like the fact that strikeouts are going up all the time, then guys are still hitting for about the same amount of power now as they did before all this business started with the Mitchell Report and biogenesis and so on, Balco, all that stuff. They're not making contact as often, but when they do make contact, the ball's going over the fences at about the same rate that it had all throughout that period.
So where do you think A-Rod stands in history? Is he a bad guy, a good guy? What do you think?
This is not a really popular thing for me to say, but watching him these last few weeks as he's kind of forced his way back into the major leagues, I think in a way he's a tragic figure and also kind of a dumb one, for want of a better term. And they go hand in hand, because this is a guy who, look, he's playing on two bad legs. He's 37, 38 years old, and he still has ridiculous ability to play Major League Baseball, to play better than a lot of guys who are younger than him. He's hitting 296, and he's under all the pressure in the world because every fan and pitchers like Ryan Dempster make it pretty clear that they don't want him there. So you think, why did this guy have to do this? Why does a guy with his financial resources have to go to some, back alley guy who says he's got magic pills or secret formulas or whatever and, ruin his reputation on what is essentially a Hail Mary to be even better than he was in the first place? So that's why I say he's a tragic figure. He's an example of a guy who had it all and for whatever reason had to have more.
John, go.
Hey, Steven, another Yankees question here. I saw that Ichiro Suzuki joining the 4,000 hit club. I'm wondering how you feel those 4,000 hits compare value-wise, because 1,300 of them were in Japan. How do those compare to the 4,000 hits of a Pete Rose and Ty Cobb?
Well, Japan, depending on who you talk to, people say that the level of play is something like AAA here. That said, I don't know that Ichiro's style of play would, mean that he wouldn't have been any less good here, because, beating out a 6-3 grounder for an infield hit is the same no matter where you are, and I think he would have done that just as well here. And I'll say something else, though, about Pete Rose's hits. The thing that helped Pete Rose break Ty Cobb's record was that he was a player manager, and he was able to write his name in the lineup for a long time past the point that he was particularly valuable to his team. Keep in mind, basically was a 45-year-old first baseman at the end, hitting 250 in singles every year. So there's a lot of fat on Rose's record, and that's even before we get into all the stuff that he did after his career. I think that Ichiro, between the two leagues, Japan and here, has been the more legitimate player in terms of amassing that total.
Wow. So both on their prime, you're going to pick Ichiro as your leadoff guy over Pete Rose?
Pete Rose had a little more power. He had a little more of an all-around game going for him. The thing about Ichiro is that except when he was at his very peak, the years he was hitting 370, he wasn't that big a run producer. It was the overall package that was really great, because you got a high average, although it was all singles, but it was a high average. He stole some bases, and he played really good defense in the outfield. Pete Rose walked a lot more, so he got on base more. He had a little more pop in his bat. So, and of course you could stick him he wasn't great defensively anywhere, but you could stick him at third base, stick him in left field. He moved all over the place. So, no, if I had to pick between the two in their peak, if you're talking about picking Ichiro 10 years ago or Pete Rose in 1972 or something, then yeah, I'd probably go with Pete Rose.
Yeah, I think I'd have to do that though, yeah.
Hey, what do you think about A-Rod hitting 11 more home runs this year? Is it feasible?
It seems kind of unlikely. It would be a lot to pack into this really short period of time. And the one thing that we haven't necessarily seen come back yet is the consistent home run power. And that's something that he was missing every single year. I mean, again, one of the great ironies about everything that he did in terms of him being the poster boy for performance-enhancing drugs is he's kind of the poster boy for them not working real well. Because if you go back to 2007 when he won his last MVP award with 54 home runs, every single year after that, 2008, 2009, in a row, his power dropped off. His ability to stay on the field dropped off too, but even within that, his power just started to ebb. Yeah. So that's the one part that we may not see come back right away. I don't think he'll hit that many more this year.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't hit that home run milestone this year, do you think he ever will?
No, I think it's unlikely. I mean, it really depends how the arbitrator rules in his case, because I think as everybody's talked about, if he goes out for a period of a year, then, or more than that, depending on how it finally comes down, given his age, it's going to be incredibly difficult for him to come back, even if he does have more time on his contract. That's a lot of atrophy for a player of that age to overcome.
Yeah.
So no, I think his numbers are kind of what they are.
So we're looking at the last month of A-Rod's career, you think?
Essentially, yeah.
It's very possible. I mean, the one thing you never know is how an arbitrator can rule. And, the one thing we do know for sure is that, the arbitrators in baseball are hired by both sides, the owners and the Players Association. And whenever one of them is unhappy with the decision, the arbitrator gets fired. So this is this guy's last case, because one way or another, he's going to make somebody very unhappy, and he's going to be gone. And even if he splits the baby, even if he undertakes the Solomonic decision and gives Alex Rodriguez half that penalty, it's still going to be really hard for him to come back.
Tom, do you have anything you want to ask? Any baseball questions?
I just have to say that when straight boys start talking about sports, things get real serious. I was worried a little bit. I'm really concerned. I'm concerned now because it's A-Rod's last month. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Well, Tom, I'll explain. Steve, Tom is a comic who has said he wants to have sex with A-Rod. He's the only guy in here who said that.
Straight boys.
He's a homosexual comic. But do you have any baseball questions, or you don't care?
If this is his last month, can you send him to my house afterwards? That's all I gotta know.
Do you have any unicorn pictures around?
I'll get him. If that's what he's into, I'll get him.
Well, I don't know, man. Again, the Ichiro thing, I think it's more like double A even in Japan. I don't buy into that at all. I think he's a great player. I just think Pete Rose in his prime, I think that's even a no-brainer. He just made more stuff happen. And was a more aggressive player.
Definitely more aggressive.
What do you think Pete Rose did, Steve? What do you think's in the Giamatti report that we don't know about? Like, do you think he bet against the Reds?
No, I don't necessarily think that he bet against them, but betting on them was a big enough crime. I mean, you talked before about games being thrown, and this really, in the era before steroids, that was the one thing that you couldn't do. There were, the one thing about, when we talk about Mark McGwire and those guys, it was wide open. They didn't have any rules about that, so you could take what you wanted to take in terms of supplements and so on. But Pete Rose, from the beginning of his career to his end, he knew the one thing you don't do is open the game to questions about gambling. And unfortunately, given his addiction, he just had to do that.
All right, well, Steve, thanks so much, man. Come back and join us anytime, and we'll talk some more baseball, all right?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Steve Goldman from SB Nation.